Welcome everyone to the Food Bank's Town Hall meeting. I'm Andrew Schiff. I'm the CEO here at the Rhode Island Community Food Bank. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning. In a little bit, I'm going to be joined by Heather Strout, the Executive Director of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Center in Newport. MLK is a member agency of the Food Bank. Heather and I will be glad to answer your questions. We want this to be interactive. If you have questions that come to mind as you hear us speaking, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. You can type in questions in a little bit. Our Chief Philanthropy Officer, Lisa Roth-Blackman, will read your questions, and then Heather and I will do our best to answer them. For the past 2 weeks, we've been listening to the voices of protesters who took to the streets after the brutal death of George Floyd at the hands of the police. And the protesters have been courageous and persistent, and they've confronted white people like me about the fact that racism is pervasive in our society. Racism runs wide and deep in our society, which means that all of us have to do something about it. We see the pervasiveness of racism in the current COVID-19 emergency. Black and Latino communities have high rates of the virus, which reflects long-standing health disparities. And in our own work, we know that Black and Latino households have higher rates of food insecurity than white households. And the COVID-19 emergency is wrecking the economy and taking a toll on these same communities. And we've seen now over the last few months a significant increase in need for food assistance. The Food Bank has responded, as you know, by primarily distributing more food and making more deliveries of food to our member agencies. We've increased our food distribution by 42%. And really, we're only able to do that because of the incredible work of our more than 160 member agencies across the state. These are the community-based organizations, our partners in the community that run the food pantries and meal programs that directly serve people in need. We've also responded to the high need in cooperation with government, in particular the Department of Human Services and the state's Emergency Management Agency. Now we have to advocate to make sure that the federal nutrition programs like SNAP are going to offer a viable safety net for people who are experiencing long-term unemployment and ongoing economic hardship from COVID-19. At the Food Bank, we want everyone in Rhode Island to have access to the food they need. And that means making sure that our member agencies serve everyone in need and that all are welcome. We say that these posters at every agency, and we mean it, and it means that we have to fight discrimination on the basis of race, ethnicity, citizenship, and we have to do more than that. We have to do our best to address barriers that keep people from receiving the food assistance that they need. This is a really good moment to now welcome Heather. As I mentioned, she's the Executive Director at the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Center in Newport. MLK has done an amazing job of making sure that they serve the entire Newport community. And in the last few months, they have done an amazing job of increasing their capacity to serve thousands of new families who are seeking food assistance. So welcome, Heather. Thank you for joining us and being here this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to have been asked to participate in this.
Tell us a little bit about what you've been seeing over the last few months.
Sure. So for those of you who don't know, the Martin Luther King Center is a community center here in Newport. We have been in existence for 98 years. In 2 short years, we will be celebrating our 100th anniversary, which is remarkable. And so many people before me led this organization to where it is today. So I'm very proud to be the executive director. Here at the MLK Center, we do a variety of different programs. We have 3 main components. Our first is hunger services, which includes a food pantry, a mobile food pantry, which is a pretty new program to the center, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. And then we have a program called Food to Friends, where we deliver food to homebound people throughout our community. We also have breakfast daily for many of the homeless people and others in our community who need breakfast. And then we have dinners throughout the month, and that's open to anybody in the community who wants dinner and wants to socialize with others. Obviously, some of those programs have changed significantly over the past 3 months, and I'll also talk more about that in a bit. In addition to that, we offer education programs. We have a preschool and after-school program and a summer camp. Our preschool reopened last week with some real restrictions, but we are thrilled to have our children back, as are the parents of those children, so that they can get back to work. And our summer camp is scheduled to reopen July 6th. Again, we have thrilled children who want to just be back together, and that program will happen again with some pretty strict guidelines, but it's still going to be a great experience for the kids who have been in front of a computer learning over these past 3 months. They're ready to get out and enjoy all that Newport County has to offer. And then we have community programs, which include exercise classes, cooking classes. AARP comes in and does tax filing for people who need help with that. Insight for the Blind comes and does support groups here. And the list goes on and on and on. So there are a lot of things that happen here at the center. And back on March 13th, that changed significantly. I'm sure many of you remember last winter when we had the gas outage here in Newport, and we were greatly affected by that in our community, but it was a week-long crisis. And the center, I think, learned a lot that week that helped us prepare for what's happened over these past few months. We were able to shift immediately without skipping a beat and change our hunger services program significantly in order to meet the needs of the community. And literally overnight, we turned our client choice pantry into a bagged distribution while still allowing some choices. So we are letting people choose the meats that they like. We're offering bags of produce, toiletry items, fresh milk, eggs, and we ask people if they want those things. We don't just assume that they want those things. The food bank has provided some really amazing creative options, such as the veggie boxes that we received this week. Those are fantastic, and our clients are thrilled to have them. Those are boxes filled with, I know I wasn't supposed to, but I opened one because I needed to see what was in it. And, it was a really large amount of very fresh produce that people received. A bag of oranges, some heads of romaine lettuce, fresh tomatoes, cucumbers, and the list goes on. A cantaloupe was in there. So I know our clients are grateful. What I do know is that people want to eat healthy, and we need to continue doing everything we can to provide those healthy options for them. And I know next week we're going to be receiving some cheese boxes. And so we're excited to see what's in those. You've done family boxes, which were a fantastic way for us to bring food out in our mobile food pantry truck. And that program has grown significantly over these past 3 months, where we bring our mobile food pantry, which is a refrigerated truck. And that was purchased back in November by the Horsies, who are a remarkable couple who are very generous supporters of the center, and they made this possible. So we are able to distribute everything in our mobile food pantry that we distribute here at the center because of the refrigeration and the ability to keep our meat frozen. And that went from going out about once a week to we go out now 4 times a week to 4 different sites, and we've done that for the past 3 months. So that has that program in itself has grown significantly. And then we've also partnered with some of the communities here in Newport County on doing some emergency food deliveries, and that's on top of our Food to Friends program, which was already in existence. And we just receive phone calls, we put together whatever is needed, and those items are delivered to people who are in quarantine or people who need emergency deliveries. So we've been able to do a lot. As Andrew said, we've served in the past 3 months 3,068 individuals, and that is a huge number for us. That's about 75% of what we did in all of 2019. But that number also doesn't really show a true picture, because most of those 3,068 individuals are coming here every 2 weeks to get food. So if you do the math, you'll see that that's a very huge number. I should have done that math, but I didn't. And about 800 of those are people that are brand new to the center who have never come to our pantry. We saw very quickly people, especially in the restaurant and hotel industry, that very first week who had never been to a pantry. We saw some really scared people who didn't know how they were going to do it. So we definitely can't solve all the problems, but the food insecurity here in Newport County is a problem that we are working very hard and feel that we are making a huge difference. And we thank the food bank for being such a huge part of that.
Heather, I know at the beginning of the crisis, it was either late March or early April, the state emergency management came together with emergency management folks in Newport and started providing FEMA meals at the Pell School. Tell us a little bit about that and what's happened to that now.
Okay, so in the first few weeks, I think it was about 3 weeks, there was no emergency help here on this island. And we, along with some of the other smaller food pantries, were providing the emergency food. And it was a lot, and it was more than we thought we could handle in the long term. So we did reach out to some of the cities and express that concern on how we could work together because we needed more help. We did have to ask our almost 600 volunteers who help at the center throughout the year to stop coming. And we relied on our staff of, at that point, it was about 16 people to run these food programs. And we knew we could not do that over the long term. We also needed to make some contingency plans for if someone on our staff got sick, how were we going to continue? We couldn't just close our doors and people would go hungry. So the towns, we all worked together. Newport opened up their own emergency food program at Pell School, and we worked really closely with them on communicating when the number started to fall down, and they reached back out and said, are we okay to close this now? Can you handle what happens? We're, the people that we've been handling, and we felt confident we can do that. And then they said they would reopen if needed down the road, because we do expect there to be another spike later in the summer or early in the fall. We worked with Jamestown. Their fire department was fabulous. They would give us a list of people who needed food. And in addition to our mobile pantry that goes over to Jamestown twice a month, and they came, picked up the food and delivered it to those people because we had the food. We just didn't have really the amount of staffing we needed to make those deliveries possible. And then Middletown did an amazing job with their police and fire. They worked with us on, instead of opening up their own emergency food site, they worked with us, and we did every 2 weeks, we did 2 different stops in Middletown, and the police and fire were there to help lift the groceries, to help unload the truck, to do whatever was needed. And we served a lot of people through those distributions, and we were so happy to have that partnership. We've seen such amazing collaboration throughout this crisis from so many in our community, but I would say the Middletown Police and Fire have been really leaders in that.
That's excellent. As we're watching the economic fallout from COVID-19, it seems like hospitality, restaurants are some of the hardest hit. And that makes us think about Newport and what the local economy is going to be like this summer and beyond. What are you seeing?
Yeah, we saw that, like I said, straight out of the beginning of this crisis. We saw a lot of the hospitality workers coming here for help. It was really staggering for us to see that the people who normally support us, we were now supporting. And we're so grateful that we're able to do that. Some of the things that we're doing now is we are purchasing our produce. We're reaching out to the local farmers who donate to the center, and we're purchasing produce through them. We're purchasing our milk through Aruta's Dairy, which is a local dairy here in Tiverton. And then we've started working with some of the caterers who have been big supporters of the center on them making prepared frozen meals that we can distribute in addition to the meat that we get from the food bank, just to give, especially for the seniors in our community, to give them an option that's easier to prepare, that's healthy, but it's also helping those caterers who received PPP money but have no work. So it's giving their employees work, and it's also giving us food, and we're paying for the food, and they are taking care of the staffing, and it's really a win-win situation. Another caterer, McGrath Catering here in Newport, and they've been in existence for, I think, about 50 years, and they've taken a huge hit during this crisis, and they've been doing a soup distribution out in front of the center on nights where the Newport has a meal schedule where there are dinners every night for people in our community that need help, and we are part of that meal schedule, but some of the people that typically serve meals have not been able to do this through this crisis. So we've tried to fill in some of those slots, and McGrath's has done that for us. And they've come, cooked the food, and distributed the food. And again, that's a way for their employees to be working and people in the community to be fed, and us to be able to give back to all of those places in our community who help us so much. So we've sent that message out very loud and clear to our hospitality industry that we are here if people need help. And we imagine this winter is going to be very tough because most people that are in that industry, they rely on making all of their money over the summer months. And many of them close down or really reduce what they do over the winter because there's not a lot going on here. So I think it's going to be a very, very tough year especially for those folks.
And it's definitely a message that we're trying to get out, that this response to the emergency has been really important, but that we see that we're going to have to be in this for the long haul. Mm-hmm. And the need is going to continue over months, maybe for the next few years. And as you're just saying, we have to be prepared to continue to meet that need. Heather, I know that we have some slides, and they're going to illustrate a bunch of the things that you just mentioned. Why don't we, so I'll start with the first few and narrating these, and then we'll get to some from MLK. This first slide are some volunteers, young and older, who are helping to unload a delivery of food from the food bank at the Good Neighbors Food Pantry in East Providence. And you see how much food they're getting and how much work there is for these folks to get into the building and then get ready for distribution. Good Neighbors is very lucky to have their own vegetable garden where they grow produce for the food pantry to supplement the fresh produce that they receive from the food bank. Here's a volunteer at the St. Vincent de Paul Food Pantry at St. Raymond's Church in Providence, packing eggs for distribution. By this point, you'll see, you've noticed in the pictures that all the volunteers are wearing masks. We're all adjusting to the Department of Health regulations for COVID-19. At one of our agencies in Central Falls, Progreso Latino, we distributed food in their parking lot for a few reasons. First of all, it makes the social distancing a little bit easier to do outside. And also, we can distribute a lot more food a lot more quickly off the back of our truck. Here's another picture from Progreso Latino that shows, first of all, the social distancing and how they're following those guidelines. And also, the team at Progreso Latino was helped here by folks in the yellow t-shirts from the Central Falls Parks and Recreation Department. I think it goes along with what you were saying, Heather. There's so many players and folks who are stepping up to help us because everyone knows that one of the primary needs in our communities across the state is food, and folks are helping us make sure that we can get the food out when we often can't have the volunteers that we've had in the past. So thank you to the Central Falls Parks and Recreation Department. And here is a box of produce. This is very similar to the box that Heather mentioned. This is part of a federal program called Farmers to Families. This box was prepared for the food bank by Farm Fresh, and it includes locally grown fresh produce and milk. The senior adult who's receiving it was very smart to bring her own cart because right now, fortunately, we're able to provide a lot of food to folks. This is a shot of volunteers at RICAN. RICAN is the Rhode Island Center assisting those in need in Charlestown. They're loading up their storage area with food made possible by a donation from Richmond Farms Fresh Market, who collected, the employees collected and donated their hazard pay that they were receiving in COVID-19. An awesome donation. And this is just a very unusual offering at the Olneyville Food Center, seedlings from our friends at a local organization, Hope's Harvest. And just, you know, we don't very often distribute seedlings, but we love it when we can allow people to grow their own food. So Heather, I think the next slides are yours.
Sure, so this is a picture of the room that we normally serve breakfast and dinners here at the center. That room has been turned into a full-scale emergency food distribution center. As you can see, on one side of the room there's a bag called Bag 1, and on the other side there's a bag called Bag 2, and those bags have different items, including cereals, canned proteins, and then you can see toilet paper on the top of one, which is something that people have been extremely grateful for during this crisis because you can't find it anywhere. And then in addition to that, there's bags of produce that people receive, milk, eggs, and different types of meat, and then the frozen to-go packages that I spoke of earlier. So that's what that picture is. That just shows. This is our mobile food pantry program. This is Oxbow Farms in Middletown, and you can see a Middletown police officer in that picture helping with that food distribution. On this particular one, and on many of them, we've also partnered with the Potter League for Animals. They come out with their mobile pet food pantry truck and distribute animal food, cat and dog food as well, which has been a wonderful partnership for people that have animals. And that's me right there. One thing that I've been able to do and have needed to do throughout this crisis is be out doing the work that we do best. And I've been grateful to have had this opportunity. Again, when our staff had to take over all the hunger programs without volunteers, it required every one of us to be doing this. So when I wasn't working on grants and in Zoom meetings such as this, I've been out doing the mobile food pantry program alongside our amazing staff. So there's me with our staff helping one of our clients, and the Middletown police officer helping as well. That particular day, we served about 150 people at that in that neighborhood. There's one of our fabulous employees, Mushiana. She's actually works in our preschool, and as I told you, we had to pivot and Our education staff all moved into hunger services, and that was one day, and you can see under that mask a big smile on her face. They were all just true leaders in stepping up and helping our community and doing it with so well. Okay, and there's more of our staff. Kyra, who's another preschool teacher, she's wiping off a shopping cart, and you can see our mobile food pantry truck. That is a refrigerated vehicle, so on that truck we're able to keep milk, eggs, and the produce so that it stays cold, and the meat. You can see that our staff is all masked and gloved, and we do have a barrier to try to keep people at that safe distance. There are times where a senior client or someone who has difficulty with mobility will come up, and you know, we do the things that we need to do to help them. And those are just some examples of some of the items that we're distributing alongside with the fresh produce, milk, eggs, meat, and toiletry products, which you can see pictured there. So that was one of the busiest days that we had. The line at that distribution went all the way down the road, and we were able to move people through quickly thanks to the Middletown Police and Fire, as well as our amazing MLK staff. And just more pictures, you can see the eggs. We have bread, where we receive bread donations from Stop and Shop Shaw's Panera Bread, and so we were able to continue giving out bread to people. And again, we're giving people a choice whenever possible. So you can see there, being able to choose the type of bread that was best for the person that we were offering it to. This is the center and how we're distributing food at the center. We realized very quickly over the past year that we needed to have Spanish-speaking staff. We've seen a large increase in people who do not speak English and who are Spanish-speaking or Portuguese-speaking clients. That the girl that you can see pictured inside the doorway, she is Becky, and she was hired during COVID-19. She is a fluent Spanish speaker and has been a great advocate for our clients. And so she's there checking people in as they come up one at a time to the door, standing 6 feet apart, and we distribute the items to people out the door. And that's Valencia on the left, who's another one of our preschool teachers who was, you know, disinfecting carts after people were taking the carts away.
Well, thank you, Heather, so much. This is just some information if you want to follow what's happening in the community and what's happening at the food bank. These are some resources for you. We, highly recommend that you follow us on social media. But Heather, I just want to say, it's sort of obvious to anybody who's been listening to you and saw those photos, what an absolutely incredible job you have done and your staff have done responding to the COVID-19 emergency, going all out, doing everything you possibly can. Staff who normally are teachers are there doing the food distribution. It's really, it's remarkable and really inspiring for all of us what you've been able to do in Newport.
Well, Andrew, I have to say it right back to you. We could not have done this without the food bank. I know the last week in April, we received, the number is staggering. Last April, the same week, we received 3,400 pounds of food from the food bank. The very same week this year, it was 34,000. So 10 times as much food was delivered that week to the food bank. And I know that doesn't happen easily. I commend the food bank and everything that you've done to support Rhode Island. I know that nothing happens if people are hungry. They can't learn, they can't work, they can't be better if they're hungry. And so it's all of our job. It's our entire state, and it's really our world's job to come together and make sure that people aren't hungry. And the food bank, you have stepped up without skipping a beat and really made that possible. So I am so proud to be, part of this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lisa, do we have some questions?
We do have a few questions. Hi, everybody. So let me just jump right to it. Heather, these are mostly aimed at you. One, which you've touched on a little bit as you spoke, but a question about whether you serve the Newport community or Newport County. So maybe you want to touch on your service area and if it's changed at all. You touched on this a little during this pandemic moment here.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I guess I assume people know what Newport County is, but why would they unless they live here? So Newport County consists of Newport, Middletown, Portsmouth, Little Compton, Tiverton, and Jamestown, and we serve all of those communities.
Great. And then another question which we get at the food bank too, so maybe Heather, you can answer first, and then Andrew. Will the MLK Junior Center be able to accept food donations again soon?
That is such a great question. So that has been one of the biggest challenges during this crisis, was making the decision to stop accepting food donations. We did that for a variety of reasons, but the most important reason was the safety of our staff and of our clients. We knew that if we were accepting donations, that our doorbell would be ringing constantly, and every time the doorbell rang, it would mean us being in front of people, people being in front of us, and also bringing stuff into the center that could potentially be contaminated. Also, without our volunteers, we just didn't have the ability to sort and be able to distribute those things. So we are making plans, just like the governor has phase 1, phase 2. So receiving food donations is in our next phase, which will happen at some point, we hope, in the beginning of July. That's our plan. And we do know that that also has to come at the same time that we're having volunteers in the building to help sort through all of that food.
Great.
Good question.
Andrew, there's a question about the Farmers to Families food box program. Maybe to speak a little bit about it, and how do the 3,750 weekly food boxes compare with the demand and needs that we're seeing on the ground?
So the program was started up in response to COVID-19 and what happened to the whole distribution network that was aimed at restaurants. So you had farmers that primarily were growing food and distributors who were only serving restaurants that now were shut down. And the idea was, how can we redirect that fresh food that's being grown and all the food that is being prepared for restaurants to food banks for donation. And so across the country, various organizations came up with ways to make it happen. In Rhode Island, we were very lucky that Farm Fresh Rhode Island was prepared to take on that challenge. So far, they have been providing about 1,000 of these boxes a week that are filled with, as I mentioned, fresh produce and milk. And for us, it's fairly easy to distribute those boxes, because on a typical week, we will have 5,000 to 10,000 people needing food assistance. So the important thing to know is that fresh produce has always been part of our food distribution. It makes up about 20% of the food that we distribute. And this is just another source of fresh produce. It's an excellent source, and we're happy for it. But whenever somebody is going for food assistance across the state, they typically are receiving a mix of, non-perishable items and fresh items, so that they can take it home and make a meal for their family.
Great. We also have a question about, has the increase in food prices affected the food bank and food pantry? It's a good question.
It is a good question, and it certainly is going to affect us more as time goes on. Two ways. One is, so the food bank cannot possibly provide the food needed to our network with just donations. We have to purchase food, and when we do that, we're purchasing food from wholesale in very large volume, typically a trailer load of food. And those prices are going up. So that means that we will need more donations of funds to be able to bring in the same amount of food. So that's one thing. The other is that for the consumer, for a person with limited cash and limited SNAP benefits, when they're shopping, their money and their benefits are not going to go as far because food is more expensive. And that will lead people to run out of food and then have to turn to us for help. So we're very concerned about this spike that we've seen in food costs and if that's going to continue over the next year.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Lisa. You know, we're very concerned about that as well, because although you know, the food bank gives us a significant amount of our food, we do purchase a significant amount of food as well, and we have seen those costs go up. And we're trying to work more with larger distributors, but until now we've really had to do, like, go to BJ's and things like that, and those prices have gone up significantly during this crisis. I'm sure everybody watching has seen that themselves, and that makes people have to choose. If someone is shopping, they're going to choose the more inexpensive, unhealthy food, and that becomes a crisis, another crisis for all of us. That becomes a health crisis. So it's something we're all concerned about, and I know that, you know, people have been very generous through this time, but that's going to have to continue for a long time for all of us to be able to meet the needs that are in front of us.
Yeah. Another question that maybe both of you can touch on. Heather, you mentioned your phases just like the governor has. So there's a question about volunteer opportunities in this environment. And I don't know if you know yet, but maybe you can speak to it. And then Andrew, you can speak for the food bank.
Sure. So right now, the volunteers that we have brought back are our breakfast volunteers. We've thought about what are the volunteers that do not have to be, you know, really within the building, or can be on the outskirts of the building and not around a lot of staff members. So our breakfast volunteers, who are the same team of people that come. So every Monday it's the same team. Every Tuesday it's the same team. So it really keeps them in a small pod. Those volunteers came back starting last week. We also, our Food to Friends delivery drivers started this week, I believe, and they bring groceries out to homebound people throughout our community. And then our mobile pantry volunteers have started back up. So again, these are all volunteers that are staying outside. Our next phase that we're expecting to start later in the month or at the beginning of July would be bringing people back into the building. And anywhere, you know, a lot of our volunteers who have been dedicated volunteers over the years here at the center are not ready to come back, and some may not be able to ever come back because of their age, and they're scared, and they need to take care of themselves, and we completely support that. So anybody who is interested in volunteering can certainly reach out, and I will put them in touch with Nancy Harton, our volunteer coordinator, because we are definitely looking for volunteers.
Great.
Yeah, and you know, very similar at the food bank. You know, our main concern is the safety of staff and of volunteers. And just like Heather, we have not had volunteers in the building since March, and we're going to not have volunteers returning to the building, we think, until September. But there are opportunities to volunteer at organizations and at member agencies of the food bank. So folks who are interested in volunteering really can look at, on our website, the list of all of the food pantries across the state and member agencies of the food bank, see which ones are in your community. The contact numbers are right there, and see if they have volunteer opportunities for you, where, you know, you can be assured that all the social distancing and everything is in place, so you can be safe and the people who are coming for assistance can be safe too.
Great. Well, I think we're all set. I think we're running out of time, and I just want to thank you, Andrew, and you, Heather, for fielding all the questions. That was terrific.
Thank you, Lisa. Again, thank you, Heather, so much for being with us this morning. And thanks to everyone who joined us for this town hall. I really appreciate your interest in our work. And please stay safe, be well, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Andrew.